Hey everybody, super excited. I've got the amazingly talented writer of Lights, Camera, Christmas, one of the breakout hits of this year's Hallmark season. So let's get at it. Hello, Gary. How are you
Hey
doing
Eric,
today?
good. How are you? Great to be here.
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me. When
Absolutely.
I saw your movie come out, I was just so excited. I was and all the writing. I was like, I want to talk to this guy, and
Excellent.
so
So
happy
glad
you
you
agreed.
enjoyed it. Yeah.
So, all right. So what I want to do is we just got 10 questions. It's going to be nice, light, easy, but I want to go into a little time machine. And I want to go first back to your point in your life. When did you decide like, hey, I want to be a writer? I actually have talent to be a writer. Because I think a lot of us are like, oh, I want to write the next great, American novel, or oh, I want to write screenplays, but we lack that thing called talent.
Right.
So when was it for you that you like, hey, I can actually do this? And tell me a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know if I knew if I had talent. All I knew was that I was interested in doing it, and somehow or other people were reading what I was writing. And that all started when I was in high school and started writing for the high school newspaper. And then I wrote for the college newspaper, and I was a journalism major in college, and I really wanted to follow a journalistic route. But sort of fate got in the way, and I ended up becoming a movie publicist for a number of years. And I did that until the point where I realized I wanted to get back to writing. But what I wanted to write was TV scripts, and it was at a time where you could actually write spec half hour, 1 hour scripts. There were only a handful of networks, unlike today, that you could sell to, and many shows, but only like limited number of networks. And I just decided to plow forward with that, not quite knowing exactly what I was doing in terms of the business, but I had the confidence that like, well, I'll give it a shot. I wasn't happy at a certain point doing what I was doing. I wanted to make a change, and it took a while, but I eventually started selling scripts and getting assignments on TV shows, and that kind of led me into the screenwriting world. And I started writing screenplays and selling some screenplays and getting some movies made. And I just kind of followed the paths that seemed to be open to me at the time. And I think one of the kind of, no pun intended, hallmarks of my career has been that I've kind of like constantly expanded my work over time. I've added to kind of what I wanted to do. And what I realized early on was that, if you're a writer, you write no matter what it is you're doing. And you may consider yourself a screenwriter, which I do, but that doesn't mean you can't write other things like plays, like journalistic work, like novels. And I've kind of expanded into each of those territories over the course of time, in addition to continuing all my screenwriting work, which is primary and which I love, but it's not always there. So you do have periods where you've got more time than others, and I like to try to fill it with with the most interesting writing to me at that particular time. The last couple of years, it turned out to be 2 novels, but it also can be writing spec TV pilots, which I do. I do a lot of writing for the LA Times, and so based upon how much time I have, I kind of do more of that. But I just love the whole writing process. I love the writing process, but I also love the being able to communicate with people on kind of like a bigger level. So I'm not working in a vacuum. I'm not creating in a vacuum. And I have certain outlets where I can, I've been fortunate enough to be able to write things that get heard or seen or read. And, over the course of my career, it's been a very valuable and motivating tool. But most of all, I really enjoy it. And, and at this point, I feel like I have a certain amount of skill with it because, I've done it so much and I've really worked on my craft, and I'm my own worst critic, or best critic, I don't know what you call it. So, I'm kind of aware of what I do. But yeah, it turned out to be a really very satisfying career.
So you were a critic who got into writing. So did you have some, I don't want to say apologizing to do, but I'm sure you were not a critic, were not always, telling the studio or the production companies like, hey, your film was fantastic. So now you're like trying to work for them. Was that like a
Uh,
sticky
you know,
transition sometimes?
it could be, but most of I mean, I've been writing film reviews for the LA Times now for about 15 years, and by and large, most of the films I've reviewed are independent films, documentaries, foreign films, I'm not reviewing, Black Panther. I'm not reviewing Avatar. I'm not reviewing the big movies. So even though I've certainly given mediocre negative reviews along the way, it's not the kind of thing where I would have, okay, I gave you a movie bad review, now I'm trying to get you to buy something of mine. But separate from that, I'm really careful about the line there. And I recuse myself from any movie that I'm assigned to review where I happen to know anybody involved, may have any connection at all. I keep it very, very separate. And it's worked really well, and it's actually just made me a better writer all the way around. Each discipline feeds the other discipline. So writing film reviews has certainly helped and writing feature articles like I do for the LA Times certainly helped my novel writing, vice versa. Playwriting has helped my screenwriting. Screenwriting has helped my playwriting, which has helped my TV writing. It's just all connected. I'm careful about the lines that I may or may not cross or don't cross. But there's really almost never been any kind of issue with it.
So you're on the other side. Now you're also getting critics who are doing critics for you.
Right.
Do you have, I'm sure you've never had a bad review in your entire life of anything you've ever written, right?
Completely not true, which is why I feel like, first of all, to be serious about it, I mean, as a screenwriter, I feel like I'm very capable of weighing in on screenplay or movie structure or narrative, TV narrative, or whatever, and story. I mean, I've certainly created enough of those and learned by doing it, and often the hard way, what works and what doesn't work. So I feel confident about that, and I'm very supportive of the writer, and I'm always there for the writer. I try to be. But I've, over the course of time, whether it's my plays, my TV movies, some theatrical films that I wrote, I've gotten my share of negative reviews, and you just go with it. I mean, it's just an opinion, really. And it just sounds so noble, but I really try to focus on the positives because, generally there are plenty of positives to focus on. And there's always going to be somebody who doesn't like it or rubs somebody the wrong way, or they see something a little differently. And it's just the nature of it. So yeah, I mean, but I have definitely gotten my share of negative reviews and things. And as a result, I feel like, I can, if I give something a negative review, I feel like, look, I've been there, and I don't want to write this, but you have a job to do, and it's just an opinion, and it's tricky, but for me, I personally try not to take it personally at all, because again, like on Lights Camera Christmas, for example, I mean, there's just so many wonderful reviews of it, and I'm just so grateful and honored by that, and you just enjoy the positives that are out there.
All right. You don't have like that one negative review that's up on your wall frame that just motivates you every day to hit the.
No, but I do remember them. I'd be lying if I said I didn't remember some of them. In fact, I was just looking at a play that I wrote. In fact, John Aniston, who just died, the actor, he was in a play of mine a long, long time ago here in LA. I think it was 1999 or something. And it was a play I wrote called Parental Discretion. And it had a great run, did really, really well. And I happened to be looking at some of the reviews because I was looking for some photos of John, and I found these reviews, and so a couple of the reviews were not great. And I was like, those weren't very good, were they? And then I found a couple that were really good, So it really depends. But I only have one review that I always remember. I don't have it. Didn't keep it, but it was a review. I wrote a film, an independent film that came out a long, long time ago, and it was at a film festival. And Variety had reviewed it, and they reviewed it not favorably, and said a couple of things in it that were like, wow. And so that was the one thing that I remember that well, because it was kind of a low point in reviews of my stuff. But maybe it was valid. I don't know. The movie wasn't reviewed a lot. You have to develop a thick skin. If you're going to put your work out there and put it out there for the world to see and write about, and hope for the best and try to do good work. Nobody sets out to write a bad movie or to write a bad play or a bad book.
I get you. That's why when I do my reviews, I always try to remember that, because like you said, no one's trying to do a bad job, and maybe they did something that I don't agree with, or maybe they did something a lot of people don't agree with. But right. I would say by and far, they're all trying to do their best, and it's art. And I try not to criticize art. I try to, if I'm criticize something specific
Right.
about it, not like an effort thing or saying you are trash or anything like
Right.
that.
Right. Exactly. You know.
But all right. So tell me a little bit, like you're saying how you went to school and you graduated for journalism, but then you got into doing the you're saying you're doing critics, right? You're doing
I was doing movie publicity. Yeah.
publicity, right? So you're doing the publicity. Like, was that just a thing where you're like, I need a job, or
Well,
like how did you fall into that and
it
then
was a
finally be able to say, no, I'm
yeah.
getting back to my roots?
It was a peculiar thing. I had graduated right before I graduated. Well, the year before I graduated from college, I ended up doing an internship. I went to school in Boston. I went to Boston University, and I did an internship my junior year with a chain of movie theaters that was based in Boston, and they had their own publicist. And I worked with her as an intern, and I really liked it because I was around movies all the time. I had to deal with screenings and press tours and all this cool stuff, and I really enjoyed it. And I felt I had a knack for putting together publicity stuff or whatever. And the woman I worked for was fantastic. So it really kind of motivated me when I realized that a job as a film reviewer, which is what I wanted to be, like writing for a newspaper or whatever back then, they were just hard to come by, and was there a real living to be made at it, or would it take me that long? I don't know. It was a decision that I had to make. And I had this internship. I really loved it, and I actually did it for part of my senior year as well. And then before I graduated from college, I just sent out resumes around New York, around New York and Boston, to do movie publicity. And it just coincidentally, another theater chain based in Boston, but they were a national chain, but they were based in Boston, needed somebody to do publicity. And they knew I had worked at this other theater chain, and the guy I met, we hit it off. And I was just a kid, and he just said, well, let's try it. Let's give it a try. And I ended up working there for 3 years and learned a ton. And then I ended up from that meeting people at Universal Pictures, and they ended up hiring me to stay in Boston, but run the Northeast for them for publicity. And then they moved me to New York for a couple of years. And then there was a big management shakeup at the studio in LA. So my boss got fired and my other boss moved up. And so he asked me to come out and fill his position. So which was like a promotion manager, publicity manager. So I was like, I always wanted to move to LA. I always wanted to live in LA. What a chance. So I took it. And then I was at the studio about 4 years. But I realized at a certain point that I didn't want my boss's job, essentially. And I had many bosses over the course of those 4 years.
Right.
And I liked the work, and I think I had a knack for it. But I just realized, while I was still young enough to make the change and had put away a little money, that I should go back to my first love, which was writing. And at the time, like I said, it seemed like a good way into the screenwriting world would be through freelance TV writing, freelance TV episodes. And that's sort of what I started with. So I wrote a couple of spec TV scripts. I was able to get an agent. The agent would send me out on tons of meetings. Little by little, I would pitch these TV shows. They'd pick one of my ideas. They hire me to write them. So I had a string of these freelance episodes that I did, and then I just sort of took it from there. So I wouldn't say it was a natural progression. It wasn't really planned per se, but I look at my time in movie publicity and how much I learned from it, and all the amazing people I met. I was working for Universal Pictures, and it's like, this was at a time where they were just like, everybody was in their movies, and I got to meet and go on tour with and be at press junkets with and spend really quality time with some amazing people. And I'll never forget that. I mean, it was just so great. But it also, being in marketing, it really helped my ability to speak to a crowd, to pitch things. Certainly made me a good pitcher. I have to go into, I don't mean on the mound, I mean when I have to go into
Right.
a room or a Zoom and pitch, story ideas or whatever. That's really helped me and took away, back then at a young age, took away some of the intimidation factor about being around bigger people. And I don't know, it's just I really believe that we do the very best we can at every moment in our life, and we're where we're supposed to be at that time. And now I feel like where I am now, it's such a nice progression of everywhere I've been in my career. and it's taken me to such a positive place that that no matter how long it's taken, I always have to feel like this was my road. This was how it was supposed to be.
Right. Well, that's actually your answer is perfect segue into my next question, which is, can you tell me a little bit like how does the pitch process work? Do you come up with an idea and you go pitch an idea? Do you pitch a full script? Is like how does that actually work? Because we all have our vision of what it is and we've
Right.
seen movies,
Right.
but what is the actual process like?
Yeah, it varies from project to project. I think with a lot of times, like I've written many spec screenplays. So when the spec screenplay world was really hot, a number of years ago, my agent would take the script, we'd go out with it to 20, 30 buyers on one weekend. We get passes or interest, by the next week. And then the production companies or whoever would take it to studios, trying to get the studio to put it into development. And it was it was not an easy process by any stretch of the imagination, but it was fairly cause and effect, fairly linear. The spec market has changed so much over time, but that's kind of how I ended up starting to write for Hallmark, because I had written a spec screenplay that did not sell as a theatrical feature, but it was a romantic comedy, and it got to them. My agent had sent it to them, and it was at the time they were looking for these romantic comedies, and they bought it, and then they hired me to rewrite it to make it more appropriate as a Hallmark movie, and it did well. So that was kind of my entree there, and then I sold 2 or 3 maybe other spec screenplays to them, which we then adapted, for Hallmark. And basically they, except for maybe some language or whatever, they really kept their shape, and turned into successful movies. So there was that. Sometimes people will come to you, like they or somebody else will come to me and say, we have a book that would need to adapt it into a screenplay. Would you be interested in that? I'll read the book if I feel like it's something that I can bring something to the table, and I understand how to adapt it and what to do with it, and they like my pitch on how to adapt it. I'll do that. Other times I'll come up with ideas. I'll pitch them either directly to a network or a buyer, or to a producer. And then the producer may take, if they like the idea, they'll take it into the network or somebody, and the network will say, oh, I like that. Let's put it into development. Or they'll say, no, we've done that already, not for us. You go somewhere else. When they put it into development, it means that you get to write an outline. You work on an outline. Let's see if there really is a movie in this. You're hired to write an outline. You do several passes on the outline, and then if they're happy with where the outline landed, then they send you the script, and then you go through various stages of writing the script until the point where they feel like, okay, we can make a decision on this. Should we move forward and make this movie, or should we call it a day? But every company works very differently. The process is different. The time frame is different. But generally, it's pretty logical. I mean, how it works, and it's basically the idea. If you have an idea that's just a little unique, or kind of just a spin on something, or is right in the wheelhouse, or just what somebody's looking for at that time, you can do well. I mean, it's really a timing issue. It's really about timing.
All right. Well, I'll get to it in a second, but I have to say, with Hallmark, a lot of the movies are very, very formulaic, right? And I'll say Lights, Camera, Christmas is unlike any Hallmark movie
Right.
that we've ever had. So it's not the big business person coming from the big city back to their hometown kind of thing and stuff like that. So that was a very unique one. Like I say, we'll get into that in a little bit.
Yep.
So just a quick question for you. So when you write because we are all things Hallmark here, like what is a Hallmark script? Is it like 100 and I don't even know how long a page is. Is it like a set thing? Like what does a Hallmark script look like? Is it
Well,
185 pages? At page 74, they break up, and page 78 they get back together or something?
Well, there's a general movie structure. Whether it's a TV movie, whether it's a feature film, there's a general start, middle, beginning, middle, and end to most movies, most stories that you tell in classic storytelling form. And it's not a paradigm. It's not a formula. It's classic storytelling. And so that's where I begin in terms of structuring a movie. And if you follow the general structure, which is made to, the structure is, I always feel like if you can hit the structure, like where it's supposed to be, and then, or generally where it's supposed to be, that or classically where it is, then you can mess it up a little bit. But I try to like to sort of hit my points and then see where I go. But it's not like, oh, it has to be, this has to happen by page 60. Well, if it happens at page 57, that's probably okay too. Because once the movie gets made, things end up happening in different places anyway. It's just they try to film a movie, and not Hallmark necessarily, anybody tries to shoot a movie where even if things are lost, the proportion stays the same. So your movements are still kind of equidistant. But in terms of numbers of pages, it really varies. It's not, somewhere maybe 100, 105 pages. The movies are, and screenplays in general now are a little bit shorter. They used to be 120 pages was your kind of touchstone. Now, we're looking at 105, 110 max for most movies. TV movies, because they're shorter by nature, they're about 85 minutes. The scripts, they may start off kind of a more traditional length of script, but and they may shoot everything or most of it, but certainly in the editing, things are going to get lost just by virtue of the time slot that we have. But again, even then, things are cut proportionally, so it doesn't feel like anything's missing in particular. Only know what's actually gone.
Or as you said, you write it, and then things get chopped out, and this, that, and the other. So when you show up on day one with a script, how different is the script by the time the movie is done? Like, are you there, and do they do a thing like, hey, we hired Kimberly Sustad and John Brotherton, so can you tweak it because this fits their personality better? Or do you have like, they're shooting, they make you change it throughout the shoot and things like that? How is that?
Yeah, I think some movies, particularly like theatrical movies I've worked on, they've changed a little bit more through production sometimes. But I think in general, the Hallmark movies and other TV movies that I've written are really great shape by the time they hit the camera, and sometimes I'll be asked is, sure, well, listen, sometimes you write a part just generically for a woman and they give it to a man, woman, and sometimes that just happens. So you have to tweak a few things after that. I guess occasionally if there's been a particular actor that you want to write for, I'm very big on, just because I write it doesn't mean that an actor can wrap their tongue around it. If you write comedy, you write banter, you write things that move quickly. I want to hear what the actor is having an issue with, and I want to write it so that the actor can deliver it the best way they can. And just like I said, just because I write it that way doesn't mean that that's the way it has to be said. So that's always something. And I've actually worked on that a lot in my theater work, because the writer is there all the time when you're rehearsing, and I would love spending time with actors and to be able to see, especially in comedy, how they put their hand in the glove of the dialogue, essentially, and what works better for them. And sometimes the actor, is just, they're just so smart, they'll just tweak it, a certain way, or say it a certain way, or underline something in their delivery, and it's hilarious, and I love that. So that kind of collaboration is really great, and it's all in the service of making something better. So I've learned a lot from my stage work about writing for actors that way. Sometimes there's a location issue. You think you'll have one location, it's not available. You've got to rewrite something for a different location that pops up. Sometimes, they do have to cut something. They're not going to be able to shoot something. Can you pull it out and let's make sure we didn't lose anything? Partly it's just continuity. Partly it's just along the way, if something changes, and things do change kind of on the fly, if they do, that it's still consistent, that we still have the continuity. So, if I can, I try to make sure that I flag any of that stuff. But it varies from film to film.
Are you on set when they film these movies?
Generally not, generally not. I can visit the set. I live in LA. A lot of these films are shot in Canada or elsewhere. So it's a harder thing to do. There's not always much of a reason to be there, short of like meeting people and experiencing it. But I have definitely been on enough sets of my movies where I got it. It's like, it's so much fun. It's great meeting people. It's an honor. But there's not much they need me for at that point, and you don't want to be, you don't want to be an extra pair of hands or or an extra butt on the set, essentially. And I think, people, all the creative talent really needs to go and do their thing. But if I'm needed for something, I'm happy to be there.
So when Lights Camera Christmas, was, hey, we're getting produced, and they announced that Kimberly Sustad was going to be the, the lead in there.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you had to be excited because, between her and Ashley Williams are probably the two best comedic talents, for there. And I imagine she brought a lot of that, how you're talking, you write the words, but it really comes down to
Yeah.
the actor to deliver them and
Yeah.
make it pop or anything like that. You had to be excited when she was
Absolutely.
cast.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had seen her in other films. I thought she was great. And also, there's something about the character of Carrie that she really matched up with really well. I mean, it was really, she put a really great spin on it. Kimberly has a certain kind of like really wryness to her, a charm, but like a wryness, and I really liked it. I like the kind of, because there are times where Carrie is really kind of, a little beleaguered. And, I thought she did that really great. And she was fantastic. And John Brotherton also brought, because when I heard that he was going to be in it, I had seen him in the Fuller House remake. And a couple of other things. I thought he was great, and that part is a very elastic part. The part of Brad is a very, it's like a little larger than life and a really comedic part. And I knew he'd be great in it, and he brought so much to it as well. So it was really some terrific casting.
Yeah, I'll say with him, and this is with a lot of my Hallmark friends, I've had this discussion. That role could have gone sideways so
Yeah.
easily. He could have been this like arrogant, unlikable,
Yeah.
but he did such a good job. And I think the combination of your writing, which made him like, yes, there's the Hollywood persona, but he kind of got it that it
Yeah.
wasn't real. And then, what was real. And so between, I think, your writing and his delivery, you're able to look at this guy who very easily you could say, I don't like him,
Right.
but he was just likable throughout
Yeah.
it, even when he was being arrogant, even when he was being, oh, I'm Mr. Christmas and all that
Right.
sort of stuff. So
Right.
I thought that
Well,
was brilliant.
thank you. Well, I think the thing is definitely, and John brought a lot of warmth and humor to that part, which definitely helped. But also, he doesn't have to call himself the king of Christmas movies, even though he does, because Nancy, Carrie's mother, says it to begin with. So it's sort of like he's just reiterating what we know, so it tempers it
Right.
a little bit. And even like even when he's still in his kind of showbiz Brad phase, and he says to Carrie, yeah, she says, why would you care why would you care? You're Brad Baxter. Why would you care what I think? And he goes, because you're really cool and you're smart and I want you to like me. And that's just a moment. He played it so well. It's like a moment where it's like, we're just people. Forget that, forget what's on the screen. We're just people, and I'm insecure too. And that, I think, went a long way in terms of easing us into his character. And then from that point on, he's much more real.
So that line I actually filmed and I shared on Instagram because that was my favorite line of the movie because it was as if you had written that exactly for Kimberly because
Yeah.
yes, it was Carrie in the role, but it's also how all of us fans view her
Yeah.
as well. So I thought that was brilliant, and like I said, that was my favorite line in the entire movie. So I'm
Oh,
glad
great. Oh, thank you.
that you brought it up. And there was a lot of really good lines. So yeah, he's the king of Christmas, but let's not forget his roots. He is the Prince of Pines, right? Prince of
Prince of
Pines.
Pines. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which love that. So we talked about how you write it and they get the characters. Do you get when you sell them the script and goes in production, are you very emotionally attached to it at that point? And do you like get like, oh, that it's not supposed to go that direction and the director's taking it some different way and things like that? Or is it pretty much, hey, here you go, here's my baby, you raise it and turn it into whatever it's going to be?
Yeah, it's
So,
pretty much,
sorry,
yeah.
as an artist, you got to have that a little bit.
Well, sure. I mean, but it is definitely that way. I mean, there are phases. First of all, filmmaking is an incredibly collaborative effort. So I feel by and large, my work has always been made better by the collaborators. I can roll out the carpet for them. I can create the blueprint. I can hand them the foundation. But you get a great director, you get a great cinematographer, you get a great costumer, like especially like on Lights, Camera, Christmas. You get a great crew, and they make your work so, they elevate your work. So my whole feeling is I love the collaborative process, and I like seeing everybody do their part and it all coming together. And not everything is going to be perfect. Not everything is going to be the way you saw it in your mind, but you do have to kind of be realistic about this the process. It's a relatively fast process. There are a lot of there are a lot of people involved. Everybody's trying to make the absolute best movie that they can. And by and large, I think, especially for Lights, Camera, Christmas, I just think everybody's participation just, really elevated it, and I hope I gave them a solid script. But, beyond that, I think, they really, did the max with it. So in that particular case, and mostly, it's a very positive thing. They'll say, listen, I've had this said to me in my stage work, like, listen, if you have a better idea, you direct it. But it's like, no, I don't want to direct. I want you to direct it and make it great. And that's what I'm trying to do. So theater, because it's so collaborative and you're there all the time, it's a little more like, like, oh my God, they're saying it a certain way, because there's no way to change it. If you're in a live performance, that's just what it's going to be. But, it's ultimately when you write enough things and have enough things produced, which I've been fortunate enough to have, you go with it. And I'm just so happy to get things made and to entertain people and move people and whatever, that, and also partly too, like I just wrote 2 novels, and, that's a case where I can adjust every single word, nothing gets changed without me, whatever. So if that's important to a writer, write a book, write something that is completely yours. Have that experience, so that when you are writing something that's more collaborative and you may not have a lot of control over at a certain point, it's okay. You get the good feeling of the entirety of the writing experience from something like a book or a play. I think it sort of calms you down, for more collaborative things like movies and television. Yeah, you put a tremendous amount of work into writing a script, and people will say, which is your favorite one? And I say, well, I probably have some that I like more than others, but or I love more. Let's say love more than others. But the truth is, they are your babies. They are they are part of your life, and I you put 1,000% into every one of them. And you become close to them. So it's hard to like say which is the best. You can sometimes say, which did you have more fun writing, which turned into a better experience, which did people seem to like more. I mean, not everyone's a winner, but yeah, but writing books has been, for that idea of not killing your darlings, essentially. You do. And listen, in my first book, The Last Birthday Party, which came out summer of 21. The book started at 98,000 words, which is a little long for what's basically a rom-com. And my editor knocked it down to 84,000 words. And
Ooh, that's a lot.
It was a lot. And she said, listen, I love the book. She says, all your stuff is in, and is great, but we can make it really propulsive. We can really make the story fly. If we just sort of like, just don't lose any story, but just kind of trim. And she did a beautiful job doing it. There was only one thing that I disagreed with in it. And she said, fine, we'll keep it, no problem. And I decided ultimately to get rid of it too, because I felt she was right. So that was a case where, you got to be very hands-on in terms of what is and isn't there, but it completely served the book really well. So yeah, every experience is different for sure.
I wonder what she would have done to Moby Dick, where she would have cut that one down. There's a lot.
That would have been allowed to be longer,
So one of the things that was great is obviously Lights, Camera, Christmas is a fantastic title. But then also in the movie, you had your like parody titles, which I have to say were not too much of a parody either, right? So did you come up with Lights, Camera, Christmas? Do you come up with the titles for your things, or does the Hallmark or the production company or something like that? And
yeah, I came up with Lights, Camera, Christmas, and I actually came up with Lights, Camera, Christmas first before I even had an idea for a movie. I don't know, the title hit me. Thinking about Christmas movies, the title hit me, and I was like, wow, I wonder if that's ever been used. And I checked, and it hadn't been used as a movie title. And I said, okay, so what's the story? And I just figured out, like, well, it's obviously has something to do with movie making, Lights, Camera, Action, Lights, Camera, Christmas. a movie being made at Christmas time. Oh, cool, that's interesting. What can I do with that? I hadn't seen that. What can I do with that? And it kind of evolved from there. I always come up with the title. Sometimes it does change, just that, based upon like even my first book, The Last Birthday Party, was originally called something else. My publisher was like, don't know if it's the best title, love the book, don't know if it's the best title. Let's think of some other titles. Ultimately, I came up with The Last Birthday Party, which was rolled off the tongue better, and we went with that. Sometimes like I've used song titles sometimes for movies, for movie titles, which generally have been okay, but occasionally, not that you can't use them, but there's a reason for not using them. And sometimes it's a title you come up with is too close to what has originally been done, before, so you change it. A couple of times they've been changed, yeah.
Okay. Do you typically come up with the title, then the story, or does the story and then the title evolves out of it?
It varies. It varies. There have definitely been times I can point to where I came up with the title first, but generally I've probably come up with the story, or at least the seed of the story first. But I like having a good title to go along with the pitch. I'll never go in and say, okay, this is the untitled Gary Goldstein comedy. I don't want to do that. I want, because if you come up with a good title, something vivid, it really frames your pitch, and it gives people something to hang the pitch on.
Okay, so Lights, Camera, Christmas. As I said earlier, it's not like any Hallmark movie we've ever seen before, right? Which, I love them all, even if they are the same sort of, theme. I still like them because everyone does their own little variation. So for you to do this, like, and I know it's impossible to say, oh, it came from this, but like, sort of tell me about how when you came up with it and you said, oh, I want to do this behind the scene, and then what was it like actually taking that too? Because not like it's in a bad way, but there is a little definitely poking, fun at Hallmark. Is it the Dazzle, right? The Dazzle network.
Dazzle Plus.
But yeah, so it's everyone knows what it is, so it's kind of making fun of yourself. So were you a little nervous like they weren't going to be like appreciative of the joke? And so tell me a little bit about that process.
Well, honestly, so much has been, so much I've read and reviews of the movie and all that have talked about it as a satire of Hallmark or whatever. I never wrote it to be that. I really wrote it to be like a little behind the scenes movie making kind of thing. But because Hallmark does so many Christmas movies, you could certainly, look at it as if not a satire, a takeoff, or kind of a probe beneath the surface kind of thing of these movies. But yeah, look, I mean, I worked with Hallmark and my production company every step along the way in terms of shaping the story. So everything that's ultimately in there were things that people were really happy with. Where we landed with it, so it was like it was anything that might have been seen as something, that might have been taken the wrong way, or whatever, because this is a comedy. We want to keep it a comedy, and it wasn't like a message movie or something per se, even though there are themes that we explore, in the movie about honesty and achieving your dreams and your goals, and being authentic and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think, to me, I just like the idea. I love the idea, the fantasy of somebody, a movie company coming to your town, and shooting a movie, and your life changes. I really like that. And there's a great book that just came out called Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan, and it's a great book, but also it's very funny because the main character in it is a writer who writes scripts for a Hallmark type channel called the Romance Channel. And it's a little bit more what Hallmark maybe has been in the past, than it is right now. But ultimately they make a movie out of one of her books, and it's shot at her own house, and she ends up in this relationship with the lead actor. And it's a great book. And I think that's just a great fantasy that people have, just being, you're kind of like an average person, or a non-showbiz person, and you're allowed to enter the showbiz world and your fantasies, and we were so used to seeing movies and things from afar, and to be able to really be part of it, it's so exciting and all of that. So that was something to me that it's always been a theme that I've liked. And then in terms of just coming up with like the funny titles in, that are his Brad's old movies. Basically a lot of titles have been used for Christmas movies. So, you're kind of running between the raindrops, to try to find those titles. And there's no business like Snow Christmas. There's no Christmas like Snow Christmas was one that, like, I think I added, kind of at the last minute, or, toward the end, and because it was just funny, and certainly had not been done. But yeah, I mean, it's just, it wasn't so much satire as like, basically, these are kind of titles you see out there, whoever's making the Christmas movies.
Any chance you're going to take one of those titles now and use it and make a sort of spin-off, so to speak?
If I get the word, I'm there.
Awesome. I love it. Okay, so you talked about, like, that book was sort of looking at what Hallmark was versus what it is now. So one of the things with Hallmark that they've been doing the last few years very visibly is getting much more into diversity. Mm-hmm. And some people are saying it's almost a little too forced and things like that, where it's like you have to have a same-sex couple who's somewhere in there and everything like that. When you were writing or when you work with Hallmark, do they have sort of a thing these days where they're saying, hey, we like this, can you please make sure you're including diversity in your script? Or is it something that's just sort of happening organically and people just know that's what's going on these days?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really speak to the broader picture of it. I can just speak to my experiences, but I think everybody, whether it's Hallmark or anybody else, by and large, are really looking to be as inclusive as possible. And I think that's just always important, whether you're writing the characters, casting the characters. I think the inclusive character and the inclusive experience has become very, very important, and for movies to feel like they're part of the, a little more part of the real world, if you will. So yeah, I mean, I think everybody's just, by and large, everybody's really looking to widen the tent, it's just funny because over the last number of years, it's really been such a great positive step, in terms of in the world of inclusiveness, and it's opened up a lot more storytelling, which is exciting.
Yeah, like I say, the big movie coming out, the Holiday Sitter, which is the first same-sex, like, is the primary one, is like,
yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's very exciting because if you go back just a couple of years, certainly was not happening. I mean, look at the whole Hillary Burton, thing there, where she just wanted to have a same-sex couple in there in the movie, and it basically ended the whole relationship with Hallmark and things like that. And now you have a movie featuring. So
yeah,
fantastic. Yeah.
Great.
So it's not something where they're like, hey, do this. They're just sort of, if you do it, you do it, or it's casting or something.
I can only speak for the things that I've worked on and things I've worked on elsewhere. So, but like I said, I think people are really looking to where it makes sense to, and where it feels authentic to expand the tent, and I'm there for it.
Okay. So last question is, so just curious, as a writer, and you write a variety of things, and you write your novels, you write your, like you say, your plays, screenplays, your critics stuff. Like, how much time do you spend a day writing? Like, are you blocked it, or do you, just, I feel like writing, I'm going to write for an hour, or are you pretty regimented? Like, I've got to write for.
I'm pretty regimented, but when there's a deadline, you're even more regimented. But my days are really about my work, and as a writer, you can work anytime. You can work on the weekends, all of that I do. It depends upon how much is going on, my workload. But, basically, sometimes people will say, well, you're so, disciplined. How do you do it? It's like, well, I'm a writer. If I don't write it, it doesn't get done. There's nobody else going to back me up, and all of that. So, but, because I work out of my house primarily. I can work anytime. So if I have to, I'll take time off for, to meet somebody for lunch. I'll have to go in the afternoon. I'll walk the dog. I have something to do. It's not 24/7, of course, but it's very consistent, and it's very all the time. Right now, I'm working on a script rewrite, so I'm working every single day as much as I can on it. Given the time that I have, as much as I can on it. There's something of a deadline on it. So it's obviously much more motivating than if you're writing a book, let's say, and you have all the time in the world to finish it. But even then, I think it's very important. Writing books, I think, you hear about people who've been writing the same book for a long time, and it's a very real thing. But it's that consistency of output that gets you to an earlier stage of completion. It may not be done, but at least you get the first draft of something done. And it's always easier to work off of a completed manuscript or script than to start from scratch. So yeah, I mean, I think if it takes a certain amount of discipline and a certain amount of output to have a career. But I have a lot of fun too, enjoy my life, and I love to write. So to me, my writing is not, it's not a burden. I love doing it.
Well, in a Hallmark universe, we've been conditioned that you'll get writer's block and then you'll go over to like Italy and stay at a villa and all of a sudden it'll all come to you and of course you'll find
There you
romancing
go.
along with it too. So that's how I view
Absolutely.
your writing
All
being.
right,
So
that's good. I like it.
perfect. So okay. So that was really all I had for Hallmark, but I know just to wrap up that you just published a new novel, The Mother I Never Knew, which is obviously
Mother I never,
very different than Lights, Camera, Christmas.
mother I never
Um,
had. Yeah.
or excuse me, The Mother I Never Had. So just tell me a little bit about that book and everything that for that novel and how that came to you and all of that.
Sure. Well, most of my writing has been in the comedy, romantic comedy, family comedy,
Right.
dramedy space. And my first novel, The Last Birthday Party, which is essentially a romantic comedy, I call it a coming of age at any age romantic comedy, was kind of it was kind of like an amalgam of so much of the things that I had experienced in my life as a writer and kind of so much of my writing. It really just sort of we came together at a really, really interesting time, and I think it's a great reflection of my approach to writing and life and all of that, even though most of it's very, very fictionalized. But I learned so much writing the book, and particularly about selling a book and marketing the book, that I was like, I learned so much. I've got to do this again. I've got to amortize this knowledge and this experience because I don't know when I'm going to be able to do it again after that. So I had a seed of an idea that was been with me for many, many years, and I never did anything with it. But I was able to take that seed and grow it into this completely fictionalized story. But it's a very serious story, even though people have
Right.
read the book say it's got a lot of humor in it, in the darkness of it. It's got a lot of humor. Wasn't really the intention. I'm glad it does, but it wasn't the intention. It's a serious story about a man who's 30 years old. He's a landscape designer living in LA, and his father dies at age 62. And the father has raised him, since infancy, essentially alone. And when the father dies, a woman comes out of the woodwork and into his life, and he learns the secret that his father never told him. And he learns that he was lied to by his father, who he adored and idolized and looked up to, and was a fantastic dad and a great person. He finds out that his father lied to him for 30 years. And it's how he reconciles the memory of his father with the presence of this new person in his life, who he needs to kind of find a way or not to integrate into his life. And she's sort of arrived on the scene on this like wave of secrets and lies. And what do you do with that? And it's essentially what happens when, as an adult, you find yourself with a parent you never knew existed for the first time in your life, and you're essentially an orphan at that point.
Right.
So you have a chance to have another parent, but what do you do with that? And how do you know everything that she's saying is true when the person she's telling you about is now gone? And so it was a story it's a kind of a what if story. I think it's kind of timely because there's so much going on these days with ancestry.com and 23andMe and people finding relatives that they never knew existed or that they've lost and can't find, and kind of reconnect with them and all of that. So it was a little bit inspired by that concept, but basically it was, to me, my mother died when I was 30, and it's a long time ago, and when she died, it was like I really missed her, and I was sort of like, boy, I wish I had a mother again, and what if somebody showed up in my life that was my mother? Even not necessarily that my real mother was not my mother, but like you want that dynamic,
Right.
the mother and son thing, and it just, and this story, there was a little seed of an idea that I tucked away, and then it sort of turned into this story that ended up being The Mother I Never Had.
All right. That's great. So where can we get the book?
The book's available through all bookstores, local bookstores. If you can go to your local Barnes and Noble. If they don't have it, they can order it for you. Any of your local independent bookstores can order it for you if they're not carrying it. And of course, all the online booksellers, Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, bookshop.org, anywhere you buy books online, it's available. So please come and, if you're a reader, please come and support it.
Perfect. All right. Well, Gary, thank you very much. This is a fantastic experience for me. I greatly appreciate your generosity.
It's great to
So
talk to you.
I hope you have another great movie coming out and we get to talk again soon.
Absolutely. Me too.
All right.
We'll see you then.
I'm the Hallmark movie reviewer. We had Gary here today. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.